Overseas now, where 2 years ago today, a deadly attack by Hamas sparked what has become Israel's longest war. This morning, as people mark this somber anniversary, the conflict still rages. Hostages remain in captivity, and the toll on both Israelis and Palestinians is staggering. Let's examine the political, humanitarian, and legal ramifications of the war by welcoming Kenneth Roth, a visiting professor at the Princeton School for Public and International Affairs. Thanks for being with us, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Local officials say Israel has caused destruction at a level not often seen. Some 67,000 people killed, a society in ruins. How do you describe the situation today in Gaza?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let's begin to note that this is the second anniversary of the October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas, obviously killing and abducting civilians. These are blatant war crimes. But a basic rule of international humanitarian law is that war crimes by one side never justify war crimes by the other. And sadly, Israel has responded to this attack, not by simply targeting Hamas, the militants, which it had every right to do, but by targeting Palestinian civilians, by killing them, by starving them, by indiscriminately bombing their neighborhoods, by killing starving Palestinians who are coming to get food, by attacking their hospitals, and by, devastating huge parts of Gaza. Estimates are that 95% of the population is displaced. More than 70% of the housing and other buildings have been destroyed. And what this seems to be about, the reason so many people call this a genocide, is it seems to be about an effort to create conditions that are so miserable, that are so life-threatening, that it forces 2 million Palestinians to flee. Netanyahu openly talks about that. The far-right ministers in his government, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, openly talk about that. Trump talked about it for a long time, although he now seems to have given up on it. And of course, his new peace plan does not countenance that. But that, I think, is how we can account for this utter devastation, this awful attack on the Palestinian civilian population in the name of attacking Hamas.
Let's talk about peace, then we'll look to the future. Israeli and Hamas negotiators held talks in Egypt about a possible swap of Israeli hostages in Gaza for Palestinians in Israeli prisons. Do you see that happening? Do you see the war ending soon?
Well, it's so hard to say because Hamas, has agreed in principle to the, hostage for prisoner swap. But this is also supposed to end the war. And Hamas clearly worries that if they give up the hostages, their only real bargaining chip, they would have to depend on Donald Trump to prevent Netanyahu from resuming fighting, as he has done in the past after temporary ceasefires. And they don't have any confidence there. Trump has continued to arm and fund the Israeli attacks on Hamas. I think they look at what he did with Putin. He, threatened severe consequences if Putin kept fighting and didn't engage in ceasefire negotiations, but there have been no consequences whatsoever. So, I think that that's what they're worried about. And the real challenge for Trump is, how can he persuade Hamas that this time he is going to restrain Netanyahu? This time this won't be just a short-term pause. They give up the last hostages, and then the effort to ethnically cleanse Gaza continues. That's the big question.
And even if there is a pause or an end to the fighting, there's a big question as to who, if anybody, would govern the territory or pay for reconstruction to restore the lives of the people of Gaza.
That's a big question. Now, the plan envisions a group of, largely local Arab states, principally Egyptian, Emirati, that would come in under some kind of board of directors, probably led by Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister, that over time there might be some Palestinian oversight, but or Palestinian participation, but not at the outset, because everybody says Hamas should not be part of that force. The Palestinian Authority is very discredited, it's corrupt, it's afraid of an election. So there needs to be significant reform of the Palestinians too. But the big, roadblock here is that if you look at the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, they say, well, sure, we will help secure Gaza, we will help reconstruct Gaza when it comes to the Gulf Arab states, but only if there's a clear pathway to a Palestinian state. They're not going to make all this effort just to have Netanyahu turn around and bomb it again in a few years. And so they want this Palestinian state, and Netanyahu has devoted his entire political career to rejecting that, to obstructing that. And so how will we overcome this? The answer, frankly, is going to come down to Trump. If he really does want a Nobel Peace Prize, he's going to have to arm twist Netanyahu enough to accept a Palestinian state, even though that's the last thing Netanyahu wants. We don't know whether Trump is willing to do that or not.
All right. That's the time we have for this subject. Unfortunately, right now we'll have to cut it short. I appreciate your time, Professor Kenneth Roth from the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs.
Thank you.